Good afternoon. My name is Thabo Makwakwa. I'm a journalist, of course, a multimedia journalist at the Daily News within independent media. And this is the Press Club South Africa. This afternoon, we have our special guest here, the Associate Professor of Economics from the Wits University, Professor Chris Malikane, who will be unpacking today the politics of the economy. Professor, I hope everyone can see you on the screen. Good afternoon and welcome to the Press Club South Africa.
Good afternoon, Thabo, and good afternoon to the viewers, the listeners, and everybody.
Of course, indeed, we want to thank them for joining us, for actually making this time to join us this afternoon as we speak about the politics of the economy in the country. Professor, there's just various issues in the country affecting, of course, every individual out there. We speak about the politics, the economy. And just before we really get started, can you just unpack a little bit about what it is that we mean when we speak of the politics of the economy?
Okay, so basically what we mean is we want to identify the social forces that are in charge of the ownership and control of an economy. In the past, we'll talk about, scholars will talk about political economy being basically a study of how the national wealth or the national income or the national product is distributed and produced amongst the different social classes in society. So when we talk about the politics of the economy, we're talking about the identification and the role of the owners and the controllers of the production and the distribution of what is produced and what is of what or what the assets of the economy are. So that's the politics of the economy.
And maybe to get started and going deeper into issues, would you please at least give us the historical basis of the South African economy?
Yes, I think this is a very important question, Thabo, because sometimes when we engage on economic issues in South Africa, we tend to forget that there are historical structural bases or foundations upon which the economy rests. And it is those faulty foundations that have not been resolved that perpetuate the continued historical problems and generate new problems on top of them. So in terms of the historical basis of the South African economy, one thing that we need to note is that this economy is based on the dispossession and the oppression and the super-exploitation of Black people, particularly the African indigenous majority. So when we talk about dispossession, we're talking about the dispossession of the land, the dispossession of cattle and all the means of production that go to the determination of production and distribution of that social product that is taking place in the economy. So without resolving those structural bases of the South African economy, the problems afflicting the majority of the people will continue. So that is the historical basis of this economy, which has not been touched. The dispossession and the super exploitation and the oppression of particularly the African indigenous majority has not been resolved. And that is the foundation, historical foundation of this economy that we have today.
And you speak, of course, about the dispossession of the land in all the means of the agricultural production in South Africa that has, of course, landed in the hands of the minority, in my understanding. But could you please at least give us, something along those lines as to how did we really actually get here where we are today, where you and I and so many other people out there have actually found themselves in this position of being dispossessed of their belongings in terms, in a form of, your land, your cattle and other things.
Yeah, so historically we know that when colonialism took place, the white people forcefully dispossessed African indigenous people of their land, and on that basis, then created out of them, as the time went on, created out of them a working class. So there was a lot of disruption, socio-economic and cultural disruption that took place during the wars of dispossession, what is called wars of dispossession. And by the early 1900s, right, when the South African economy was now put on a capitalist basis, which required, right, a large section of what we call the proletariat, the workers, wage earners, they could not, you know, the colonial capitalists, white capitalists could not get sufficient African people to play that role of being a proletariat to be exploited in the workplaces. So what they do, they started coming with a battery of laws, tax laws, particularly, we know Puze Kemis with his song, Puze Kemis and Ketan, with their song Injayam, where they came with dog taxes, hard taxes, and all sorts of a battery of laws. And the key one was the Native Land Act of 1913, right, which dispossessed African people and made them to be pariahs in their land of birth. And another one came, another battery land act came in 1936, which further dispossessed African people. And they continue to refine the dispossession over time to generate this sea of desperate Africans who can then be exploited in the mines and so forth. I mean, in the 1940s, if you look at statistics, in the 1940s, 1950s, you find that in the mines, actually, more than 50% of the workforce in the mines was drawn from neighboring countries, not from within South Africa, because there was still resistance of African people to be moved away from the land. But there was a battery of laws that was continually passed to a point where African people were then completely dispossessed of fertile, particularly the fertile parts of the land. And during that process, there were disruptions. There were also the development of townships. So the many African people that you find in townships, they are a product of that historical development that was disruptive on African people's life. So as we see today, we have a sea of unemployed African people, and we have a sea of employed African people who are reeling under the exploitation by largely the white minority. So the structure of oppression, the structure of exploitation remains as I've historically outlined. There are a few black capitalists here and there, but when you look at the core, you know, the core people who control ownership, who control the economy and own the means of production, this could remain white. And it's an anomaly, right? In an African country where the indigenous majority are 90% of the population, but you look at the capitalist class that is in charge of the means of production, it's a historical minority, a colonial minority. And that fact needs to be put squarely by scholars, by activists, by opinion makers to the fore, to say we cannot continue with this historical injustice that was identified a long time ago by people such as former President Thabo Mbeki. So that is why we are here today, as particularly the African majority in South Africa.
Okay, if you can bear with me, Professor, I kept losing you there. I'm not sure if it's my connection on my end or your side, but anyway, moving right along, we speak politics of the economy, and we are joined, of course, in conversation by Professor Chris Malikane from Wits University. Now, Professor, you have given us at least the historical background of how we got here. Now, speaking of this economy that now belongs into the hands of this minority that you have referred to, of course, who are this minority? And what are we doing about that?
Okay, when you look at the scholars that have written about the forces that control the South African economy, the key, the linchpin of look at the historical structure of this economy is what is called the minerals energy complex, right? All the industries that would fall under what we call the minerals energy complex, and the people or the companies that own and control this minerals energy complex, that is the core of the South African economy. And over time, we know that then finance came into the picture. We talk about the minerals, energy, finance complex. That is the heartbeat of the South African economy today. So if you dig behind the ownership of the mines, for example, you look at Anglo-American DPS, these are the big owners of the mines. And then you look at the ownership of industry that is associated with that, be it heavy manufacturing industry, but that is heavily reliant on the minerals energy inputs from the minerals energy complex. You look at the fuel, petrochemicals, you know, and we know that historically the state played a very big role in that sector as well. So you have Sasol, for example. You know, Sasol is part of the minerals energy complex. It's part the energy part, and the minerals part are linked in Sasol through coal, for example. And then the state, you see, when we talk about now, maybe I'm jumping around, but when you look at the state, talk about state capture, you look at those interlinkages at the level of the production of the economy, right? That Eskom is linked to the minerals energy complex. So who owns the minerals that Eskom is using for energy production, and who benefits from the energy that Eskom is producing largely in industry? So you see that it's a network. It's an accumulation system structure. And behind this accumulation structure are people, right? And these people, politically, to secure themselves, they must make sure that the state continues to play that role in that in that accumulation system. And no politician can emerge to disrupt or to dislocate the state from that accumulation system. I don't know if you are still following me, or there was a break there.
Yeah, I agree that there was a break right there, but I'm still following. Yeah, you may continue.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that given the role of the state in the minerals energy complex, it becomes very crucial for the owners of the minerals energy complex, right, the private owners of the minerals energy complex, to ensure that the politicians who enter the state, the bureaucrats who are in the state apparatus, are driving the state and state policy in line with the accumulation system that they've set historically. No politician can enter such a state and that politician begins to dislocate the state from the accumulation system of the minerals energy complex. So that is why some of us have argued that the structure of the South African economy is such that the state historically has been captured by these forces. If you try to dislocate the state from that, then you become a problem to these dominant forces.
Now, Prof, we have got what others may refer to as a functional or dysfunctional, government in the country. I would like to believe that they are functional, of course. And these are lawmakers in parliament who are representing, us as the society. We are their constituency. And of course, there are conferences in various political parties that take place, and resolutions are passed there. These are people who are in parliament. What is the challenge in actually making sure that they change this ownership of minerals, the mines? Of course, the question of the land comes in as well, so that this economy can actually directly benefit the people of this country?
Yeah, my assessment and my reading of the literature suggests that these historical forces that have controlled the minerals energy finance complex, they managed to capture some of the key leaders, particularly of the ANC, so that these leaders participate in the accumulation of wealth without changing the accumulation system as it has historically evolved. So if there are to be any policy changes, those policy changes must be introduced first by the owners of the minerals energy complex, the minerals energy finance complex, and then the politicians will then implement them because they are already beholden to them. They've got deals or accumulation deals with them. So what happens then is that the political parties, or the ANC in particular, it just becomes a legitimizing force. People can come and take radical resolutions and air their anger, they can and express their rage, and take resolutions. But at the end of the day, a leadership that will emerge and go to the executive is a leadership that is not going to tamper with the accumulation system of the minerals energy finance complex. And there's a conflict of interest as well with the members of parliament, because the members of parliament, they are also having career ambitions. Ministers, cabinet ministers and deployments are coming from the executive. So if you're a member of parliament and you begin to be very problematic in terms of exercising oversight in line with the resolution of your party, particularly the ANC, over the executive, then you are career limiting yourself, because the president is not going to appoint you to be a minister because you're problematic. You're not going to get lucrative deployments and so forth. So there's that timidness that comes with parliament. But also, it does not mean that members of parliament are not partaking on the side into this accumulation system. Because when you talk about the state, you talk about the overall capture, not just of the executive, but the overall capture of the judiciary, to make sure that it interprets the laws in the interest of the accumulation system. You talk about the members of parliament also who have business deals, right, who participate in the accumulation, making sure that they don't disturb the executive when the executive continues to pursue the interest of this accumulation system. So it's a complete capture of the state apparatus and political parties and politicians. And beyond that, it's capture of everything, including the capture of your institutions of higher learning, your intellectuals. It's capturing everything, the media, everything. So yeah, so that's how powerful this system or these forces are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that this is one platform or one of the few out there that is not captured as yet. Professor, you stress, these elements of capture that some, of course, are out there for everyone to see. I mean, the people talk about these things every day, venting out their frustration and anger. But now, is there a prospect of actually having to close down on these things, ensuring that these captures that are unfolding or have been unfolding are kind of like put into a stop where we need to say we draw the line as the people, and of course with people like you giving advice as to what is it that needs to be done? What are the prospects of actually resolving this? And I'm speaking, the question of land as well, which you have touched on passionately, in terms of, the ownership of the resources in this country. What is it that needs to be done?
What needs to be done is basically to organize. And the people must organize on the basis of clear programs that do not compromise, the principles for which many of our ancestors died for, defending this land. We are in a position where we need to remind ourselves of who we are, particularly as the African people in this country. We need to remind them who we are. What is our land? What is our country? What do we own? Because if we do not start from there and begin to organize and establish organs or organizations that in one way or the other coalesce into a movement that is driving towards the liberation of the land and the people from this continued colonial oppression, nothing is going to happen. As long as we point each other and we say, but Thabo, you are this, you are that. The fact of the matter is that the Makwakwas and the Malikanes were dispossessed, regardless of whether we belong to the EFF, the AC. The fact of the matter is that we're dispossessed, all of us as African people. And we need to reclaim our heritage. And it's only on that basis that there will be prospects to break down this power. Because I want to tell you something. the strength of this power. You know, these forces are united. You know, in South Africa, for an example, the core colonizing force that we all know is an axis of the British and the Afrikaners. And that axis is not broken. It is not broken. It might have recruited a few Africans, you know, to be chocolate on the on the milk, right? But it has not broken. It still remains united. But when you look at the African bloc is so fragmented, you know. So we need to begin resolving that fragmentation of the African people into various political parties, religions, beliefs, and all of that. Create a platform where we say, this is what unites us. We were dispossessed, we are being super exploited, we continue to be oppressed in corridors of power and in the workplaces as African people and discriminated against, and begin to establish organs that address those issues in the various spaces and begin to form that national movement that articulates our interests very clearly. You know, without that, without the capacity and the courage to establish that, these forces will continue because they are very much united as an axis and they're not compromising, Yeah.
No, Prof.
And they've got international links, eh? They've got international links. So in that unity that we need to forge, we also need to create friends, international friends, to help us to continue our struggle. It's very, very important, that international dimension.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one is just, you know, tempted to ask a question here. I mean, each day in South Africa, you hear of a new civil movement, you know, political organization being launched. Isn't that a way of actually, you know, trying to organize, you know, towards the liberation, the emancipation of the people? There are just, I don't know how many political parties out there, movements out there, each day, you know, people are launching. Are we not sort of trying to move towards that path of, you know, organizing, as you suggest that we need to?
Yes, the weakness in that is that once you create a political party, you have to contend with the fact that you need to then contest with another political party for political space and begin to criticize another political party in order to gain mileage. That is fragmentation. So people, my view is that African people can form political parties, you know, but one thing for sure is certain is that all these political parties must ultimately find unity. There must be a front of these political parties where there is a basic program that says that we might differ on how to run ESCOM, we might differ on how to run monetary policy and all of that, right? But one thing for sure, all of us are united in returning the land to its original owners, which is the African people, and to making sure that this economy is owned and controlled by the African indigenous majority. It's very important. So that basis of unity needs to be established, and for all political can be formed, but that platform must be sacrosanct. So that any political party emerging from African people that is formed, once it touches on that platform and deviates from that platform, we know it's an agent of colonialism and imperialism to oppress us. That's it. So we need to just establish that platform. So we can have ANC, EFF, UTM, all of them, but all of them must subscribe. When they get to parliament, when it comes to that issue, they must all subscribe to a common position.
Mm-hmm. I think at the core of it, it's all about, you know, just emancipating our people, and doing so require, of course, that you know, the things that you have mentioned are returned to the rightful owners. And maybe you can tell us at a later stage or now, if you don't mind, as to who exactly is the custodian or someone that had, like, you know, that has, you know, a right to those. But I want to speak about the stagnant economy of this country. It's refusing to actually, you know, to grow. And I would recall that, and obviously everyone else listening here today would know that a few years back, we had, like, you know, for the very first time in the country, we had rating agencies that were very, very explicit, very, very vocal in terms of, you know, saying that the economy was not, your Moody's and others. Tell us a bit, why is it that the economy is refusing to grow?
Okay, the starting point is that you've got this tiny minority of the white population, which is monopolizing the profits that are coming from production in this economy. And instead of reinvesting, this is a colonial minority with an imperialist mindset. It's not a nationalist. It's not an African nationalist ruling class, if I can put it like that. So the profits that they get, they take the profits out of the country instead of reinvesting them in the country. So they don't care about building the capacity of the country of South Africa to produce its own means of production and means of survival, food and so forth, and to support the development of the African continent. They're not into that. They are interested in making profits and exporting or taking the profits out and not reinvesting. They are interested in making sure that the African economy, particularly the South African economy, remains in the global division of labor of being exporters of raw minerals and not beneficiating or adding value, building a strong manufacturing base. I mean, if you look at countries, post-colonial countries that have managed to industrialize and build sophisticated manufacturing sectors, those economies, one of the things that you discover is, first and foremost, those economies are owned and controlled. The big sectors, what you call the commanding heights, are owned and controlled by either the state or the nationals, not a colonial force, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that the degree of independence, right, is reflected in the degree of your capacity to manufacture or to industrialize. So as you deindustrialize, you lose your manufacturing base, the more dependent you are to other economies for you to be provided with capital goods and so forth and so forth. So the fight, you know, in short, the social force that is in charge of the economy is not interested in building the capacity of this economy to be independent from the superpowers. No, because they are part of the ruling classes of those superpowers. Their role is to ensure that this economy takes the coal out and supports the superpowers, takes the minerals and supports the industrialization and jobs in other countries. So that is why you find that the capacity of the South African economy to create jobs is very limited. That's the second, another thing. And then you look at in this country, you look at communities, right? Rural areas, African working class communities, you find that there's massive shortage of services, right? And there's a massive backlogs of infrastructure. On the one hand, there's massive unemployment. Why is that the case? It's because the colonial force that is in charge does not care about the livelihoods and the life conditions, the standard of living of the indigenous majority. You know, their interest is to make sure that they direct resources out of this economy. You know, so why would you care if you are a colonial force? Why would you care that your colonized masses do not have clean water, do not have pollution facilities, do not have proper housing? Why would you care? Because you are here to extract. You know, you don't care. And if the indigenous, the local indigenous people resist being exploited, they start resisting and disrupting. All you do, you just draw the labor from the continent, from the rest of the continent, you know, to continue with your accumulation strategy, you know. So that's why we have this situation. The colonizing force is the force that is in charge of the economy is not interested. It's a colonizing force. It's not interested in national development. Thabo, can you hear me?
Political analyst.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, I'm still with you. One political analyst said on television, you know, some time back, that the black majority has been defeated, and now you are also saying here that we need to sort of like have this sense of I don't know, energy where we get to disrupt the system. And I see, of course, a lot of other people, movements out there attempting to do that, but the sort of reception they receive, the backlash they receive from, you know, the owners of the economy is just so intense that people would remain out of jobs. And you would, if of course you have got a business, even funding those movements, you would have your banking facilities closed and all of that. But before we go into the issues of, you know, the financial sector closing bank accounts for certain, you know, targets out there, I want us to just speak of the fact that the president, you know, always says that South Africa is open for investments. And I ask myself this question: which company in the world is not in South Africa yet? These big corporations are in the country, and all we're concerned about as a country is that we need to create this conducive space for the investors to come in. But now, Prof, you have highlighted that they are not interested in capacitating our economy, but rather taking what we have to benefit themselves financially, and of course, build and strengthen their economies in the West and other, you know, countries. What is it that we need to do? We have created this environment for investors, and yet our youth remains unemployed. Infrastructure is not developing. Service delivery is failing in the country. What is missing? What has to be done?
Yeah, you see, the problem is first and foremost, you know, we need to be objective and be ruthlessly honest about the type of leadership that we have and have had in the past. In my view, it was a compromised leadership. We are where we are today because we entrusted certain people with leadership responsibilities to take our interest forward. Within the context, of course, of the challenges posed by the global economy and so forth, but in whatever they were supposed to do, they were supposed to defend our long-term interest as a people, right? And they failed. They failed, right? I'll give you an example. The privatization of ISCO, which is a steel-making company, particularly, we know that it started in 1993, but then, you know, for it to be sold now to ArcelorMittal, which is a global conglomerate, steel-making conglomerate, was a blow to industrialization in South Africa. And then secondly, the allowing Sasol to have excessive foreign ownership. I mean, at some point, even ABSA was owned by Barclays. You know, this allowing Old Mutual to delist and list Anglo-American to run away, basically, to list in London. All those things. And the allowing pension funds, you know, our own parents' savings and our own savings as workers, right? Being allowed to be invested offshore instead of being invested in infrastructure to develop our communities and rural areas, right? All of those are due to a leadership, in my view. They don't make sense from a nationalist point of view. They don't make sense from the long-term development point of view. So it's a problem of leadership that we have, the political leadership that is compromised because it is embedded in that accumulation system that I spoke about earlier. I mean, once you have amongst this political leadership people who want to shift policy-wise from this accumulation strategy, then those political leaders will be painted, you know, with a bad brush as bad leaders, sometimes corrupt leaders, and so forth, right? And the leaders who pursue this strategy are then elevated as the best things that ever happened to this country, when in fact they failed us. You know, we're in this situation because they failed us. So that is where we are. We need to resolve. I mean, look at the president now, right? We know the president accumulated his wealth on the basis of the minerals energy complex. It's as simple as that, right? We can jump up and down. There's no way that by simply signing a paper saying that I am no longer involved in my companies. I'm now doing public service as deputy president and president. Therefore, it means that you are no longer involved in business. It's not true, because social science tells us that the capitalist class controls the state, and the state bureaucracy is beholden to the capitalist class. There are these networks that exist, whether there's a paper or no paper, right? So there's no way that the current administration under the President Ramaphosa is going to drive industrialization. In fact, my view is that they're destroying the capacity to industrialize by destroying ESCOM, by destroying Transnet, by making Prasa dysfunctional, you know, and all of that. There's no way. So if we keep on looking up to this type of leadership as a solution to our problems, it's not going to happen. We need to begin looking elsewhere, and we need to look inside as to who are the people who are not compromised, who have the true interest of the long-term development of this country forward, particularly the African, you know, increasing the power of the African indigenous majority to own and control the means of production. That is what is important. And Thabo, just another thing to say is that we don't want a leadership that is beholden to private capital, you know, because we need to learn from the East. We need to learn from East Asia. In order not to create conflicts amongst ourselves as Africans, we need to ensure that the commanding heights of the economy, the mineral wealth, the land, you know, key strategic industries are in the hands of the state, so that the industrial capitalists that emerge from amongst us are able to operate downstream industry to innovate and so forth, supported by this powerful state. That is what we learn from China. That is what we learn from India. That is what we learn from South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan. You know, there's no way, there's no post-colonial experience that is successful without heavy state intervention in strategic sectors. So any politician that talk African empowerment, but at the same time talks about the need to privatize ESCOM and not to nationalize SASO, is a fake, in my view.
Mm-hmm. So we are 37 minutes into this discussion, of course, the politics of the economy. And I believe that it's not a two-man show. There are many other people who would like to join, ask questions, and of course, maybe contribute. We just need to be mindful of the time. But before we do so, there are two other aspects which I want us to, you know, briefly touch on, and then we can open the space for the platform for others to come in, ask questions. And as we continue with this conversation, Professor, you are saying that, you know, the current administration is not doing well, is failing the country. They are destroying the state capacity. But I don't understand how, because it's capture that was, you know, has unfolded in the country. And well, of course, there is a debate about that. And of course, others are saying that actually the state is captured now. It wasn't then, but only captured now. Can you just unpack a little so that we understand what you mean when you say that the current administration is failing the country as the state institutions collapse?
Yes, so before I did mention that there was a minerals energy finance complex that is in charge of the core heartbeat of the accumulation system in South Africa. And the finance aspect, which in banks, and they're in charge of treasury, the Reserve Bank, and all of that, you know. So they've captured, but all of them are aligned. They are aligned because it's one and the same people who are in charge of finance and the core minerals energy complex. Now, the capture has been there. The problem arose when, in my view, when during the era of President Zuma, there were now moves by politicians and some bureaucrats to dislodge the state-owned entities and the state policy away from the normal alignment with the accumulation system that we had historically. So there was a contestation over who is in charge of the accumulation system, and the entry of new people into that accumulation was disrupting the historical relationship that was there between the state and the private owners of the minerals energy finance complex. That was the problem, in my view, of President Jacob Zuma's administration towards its end. Now, what you have, because the ANC, you see, because the ANC has got this potential to elect a leader who can be rogue, you see, the ANC now becomes a dangerous and untrustworthy platform, political platform, that can generate politicians that can be easily captured into when they operate into the executive. So the ANC then becomes what is no longer as valuable as it was, because it has that tendency, it has demonstrated a tendency to generate rogue elements. So what do? We need to dislodge the ANC first, right? Dismember it, because it has capacity to be captured by forces that are not aligned to the white monopoly capital, as I would call it, that minerals energy complex. Now, the second step is that because they see that they are heavily, the state plays a very important link in the accumulation system, right? We need to find ways in which we can continue accumulation without the state, you see. So what do? We need to make sure that we dislocate ESCOM, dismember ESCOM, and make sure that we have a private system of energy supply. We have a private system of transportation, right, of rail transportation. We need to find ways where it is possible to remove the state so that we have a private system of accumulation, because the state itself, like the ANC, is no longer a reliable force, institution that can play this strategic role in the accumulation system. So what we see, in my view, in ESCOM is nothing but a way of trying to remove the state from the energy accumulation system so that you have more control through privatization of the energy supply. Because once the state begins to play that strategic role again, we become vulnerable to the Jacob Zuma problem.
All right. Okay, I think we must just pack it there for now. This is the Press Club South Africa hosting Professor Chris Malikane from Wits. Of course, he's an economics professor in that mega massive university. I'm hoping that the technical team would assist me, of course, to, not the hands of those who want to ask questions to the professor as we continue engaging on this matter. I will open, just around for the Q&A so that we deal with this as we continue. Is there any other hand that wants to speak? I saw earlier on there was Mr. Kalni Heiss. Is there any hand? All right. I don't see any on my side. I don't see any on my side. Of course, there was a question that I saw on our messages asking if this conversation is being recorded. Of course, it is being recorded, and we hope that the technical team will be able to share that with you at the end of the session so that you may access it at a later stage. And of course, it will be helpful for those who have just joined now or moments after we have started to actually be on the lookout so that they can revisit that at any time, of their convenience. Kalni Heiss, I'm going to allow you to speak, ask questions, of course, and contribute. So let us just be mindful of the time again, because we have at least until 2 o'clock before the end of the session. Thank you very much. Carl?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Loud and clear.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me congratulate you on this discussion, and the topic that Professor Malikane is addressing, of course, is one that we have discussed many times before. I do not want to expand too much on it this afternoon because Professor Malikane is far more competent to do so than I am. My question to him this afternoon is, how do we deal with the current situation within the African National Congress? I understand what you say about the way in which the ANC operates at the moment. But Prof, do you think there is a chance that the branches of the African National Congress that are sitting in branch general meetings at the moment actually have a chance to be able to make a fundamental change to the position that the ANC is taking at the moment under the leadership of this comprador capitalist class as represented by Cyril Ramaphosa and his cronies? You think that if the ANC branches are able to come up with clear policy positions at their branch general meetings and are able to marry that with proposals for a leadership to be elected that are committed to the implementation of those policies, you think that the ANC can actually still make a difference? Or do you think we are too far down the road for the ANC as, I almost want to say, former liberation movement, because currently it is not fulfilling its role as a liberation movement? Or do you think we're too far down the road for the ANC and to be able to fulfill that historical duty that it had in the past? I can say much more about it, but I think for now, let's leave it up to you to respond to that. And I want to thank you in conclusion for the manner in which you articulated, especially the historical context of our liberation struggle. I think one of the biggest problems that we faced with in South Africa is a lack of historical understanding and the death of ideology, both of which the current leadership in the ANC had played an insidious role in actually leading to that situation. I suppose what I say at the end of the day is, do you agree with me that whatever we do, we have to get rid of Cyril Ramaphosa? Yeah, I'm finished.
Thabo, you are muted.
Hello?
We can hear you now, Thabo.
Oh, my apologies once again. I wanted to check. Okay, I see there's a hand. Before you can actually respond to Mr. Kalnihais, there's a hand by Clay Tsapi. Clay Tsapi, please unmute your mic, ask the question, and the professor will then respond before we move on into others.
Thank you, Thabo. Mine is going to be a very short one. Just to say that, do you really think it is possible, Prof, for all the different political parties to come together under one banner? I heard you of the idea that we must all come together, especially around one, idea, especially of the land reclamation. Is it possible? We've heard it over and over again. The EFF, we have the RET forces within the ANC, but never really getting these forces to come together under one voice. Is it possible? Do you see that as a reality at all in the current circumstances? Thank you.
Thank you right there, Mr. Tsapi. Prof, over to you.
Thank you. These are difficult questions, but just to respond to Carl, the ANC branches have got a huge responsibility to fashion the ANC with a leadership that is not comprador. And perhaps what we need to do, ANC members and non-ANC members, because the ANC plays a very important role in the life, political life of South Africans. I know many people are not ANC members. They are singing the tune that the ANC will die in 2024. But be that as it may, it will still remain, in my view, realistically, an important political party in that field of political parties. So the branches of the ANC need to be made aware from various angles, from churches, from intellectuals, from opinion makers broadly, that there is a responsibility that they have, they carry in the upcoming conference that they have. So there is a possibility that if this is made, you know, some of the branches have pronounced already, right, or on the types of leaders that they want. But at the end of the day, a branch member needs to go and put a cross. You can pronounce, right? But when you put a cross in that conference, it's your conscience that must guide you politically as to, is this really in the interest of the African majority, or is it in your interest because you've taken some money into your pocket personally, and you are continuing this historical problem of that we face. These are the issues that must be raised to delegates of the ANC as they go. If delegates of the ANC, branches of the ANC still give us a compromised leadership, then it is clear that the ANC branches are not even listening, you know, are not even, it's going to make the ANC to be even more and more isolated from the masses of the people. So for me, regardless of their pronouncements, right, but if we are able to shape opinion and to write and to speak about the type of leadership that we want, that is going to go a long way in opening people's minds to make the right choices when it is between the second between the cross and the pen and the paper in making the cross in that conference will determine what type of leadership will emerge. But that will be shaped by what we do going forward from now towards the conference. And just to also say that branches of the ANC, some are bought, some are not bought, but it is important that the ANC needs to introspect really and reflect on these things. You know, the minerals energy complex is the core, and the owners of the minerals energy finance complex have captured the leadership of the ANC. And the branches of the ANC need to be aware of this, right? If they continue to give us a leadership that is compromised, then it's their choice. There's nothing we can do. It's their choice to bury the ANC with that comprador leadership that they gave us. And for the question that Clay has asked, the possibility that political parties can come together under what, is there a possibility? I think that that possibility could arise if, number one, all the political parties in their elective conferences take a resolution to say that we need to form a united front with parties that broadly share our mission of liberation of African people in South Africa. You know, if the ANC, for example, in December can take that resolution that we need to form a united front or a political front of liberation parties that are aligned to the idea of African liberation. The EFF does the same, right? And perhaps AZAPO, PAC, and others, UDM, they take that resolution, then it would be a first step in the right direction, in my view.
Thank you very much, Professor, right there. And yeah, I have a connection problem here. You would know that the country is going through a lot. The energy crisis, of course.
Yeah.
I will take another hand by Isaac Como. Isaac Como, please unmute your mic, ask the question.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Isakomo. After you, you'll be followed by Rensley Godfrey Mhlari. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Carry on.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me. And one thing I would say that thanks, Prof. You actually sort of hit the nail on the head. Now, what Prof has said is what people have been saying for a long time, that basically South Africa is nothing but...
Excuse me. Can you all mute your mics, please? Except, of course, for those asking questions. The rest of you may mute your mics. Thank you. Please carry on, Mr. Com.
Okay. What I say that say first thanks to Professor Chris Malikane. Yeah, because he has actually put the whole thing very clearly. Now, the thing is that people could realize that the settler colonial state, it's intact from the Boer regimes up to the Union of South Africa, right into the post-1994. We are living with it. And before we can actually realize that, we shall never go forward. And that's what the professors actually succinctly put forward. But no, the thing is this, that to change that, we have got to actually have an epistemic change in our way that we look at the whole situation and look at ourselves. The thing is epistemic. We cannot actually come and try to solve this by having these political parties coming together. The whole thing that we as Africans, we as the natives, we have got to change the way we perceive the whole thing, whereby the professors talk about ownership of the land, ownership of what, but we have to take ownership of our own lives, our own future. Yeah, we cannot actually come and base that on the Freedom Charter, which is it's full of utopia. Yeah, and that's the thing that you're actually going to base your struggle. Now that's one problem. But let's go forward. When you come to the present time of neoliberalism, you find that the heroes of the Black South Africans, Mandela, who basically, I mean, all due respect, when it came to the economy, he was clueless. He was basically captured. Yeah. When it came to other people who were looked upon as being the intellectuals, the Thabo Makwakwas, they were totally captured. And the travel manuals, they were totally captured. They went to this neoliberal thing of actually sort of privatizing. Now, how can you, as the professor said, how can you privatize issues which are basic to the economy or to the economy of the country? Yeah? I mean to say that the book, or what do you call it, the Bad Samaritans, it actually points out to the fact that the Tigers themselves, they had a centrally planned economy which was in the hands of the states. Be it Taiwan, be it South Korea, be it the whole lot. Now you come and privatize it and allow them to have the primary listing abroad, which means they just shift the whole money abroad. And you expect them to come and bring it back now. Huh? This thing of privatizing of ISCO, the thing about ISCO, it was not the mills. The key thing of ISCO was the mines. You had over 80% of the world's platinum. You privatize it. The Waterberg coal, everything is just gone and given away. Huh? Now, what do you expect from that? And these mining companies, the so-called mineral energy accumulation complex, they do one thing. When they sell the minerals, they sell the minerals to the offshore companies at a reduced price. Now, basically, that is a challenge that we have been facing. We as Africans, we have actually got to come up with an Africanist. I'm not pushing the politics of any particular party, but I'm just saying that we have got to be African, in the sense that that is an epistemic change. Without that, we can never do it. And we do not have the national bourgeoisie. Yeah, but the state has got to play that part. Where is the state? It is actually getting out. The issue of privatizing of ESCOM, this power cuts and everything is just fake. Basically, if ESCOM has gone, I'm a chemical engineer, basically. That's what I actually studied in Britain in the 70s. I'm not a journalist. But with the issue of ESCOM, The problem with Eskom was this, that when China was there as a big market, those suppliers of Eskom, they pushed the on-spec coal to China, and they pushed the off-spec coal to Eskom. Off-spec coal cannot give you your superheated steam because it's off specification. And that wet steam tears your turbine blades. That was where the problem started. But now we've got a problem of actually the coal suppliers, they're taking the coal to Europe. That's all that there is. You're saying that we cannot, power cuts are due to, outages are due to the open circuit. The open circuit actually accounts for just 5% of Eskom generation capacity. How can that actually cause this nationwide problem? Now we are being lied to as kids. But it's up to the South Africans themselves to wake up. The ANC can never do it. They will never do it. It's too compromised from top to bottom, even up to the branches. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Como, speaking passionately about this matter. I can sense, you know, the anger, the frustration, and of course, that is a reflection of how.
Can you hear?
I can hear you. Yeah, we had a slight problem there. I'm not sure if it's because we are past our 1 hour or there was something else. Can you hear me, Prof?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Just in rounding up the conversation, Professor, I think we have run out of time. I want us to, of course, you are going to do the closing, but there's also, you know, an elephant in the room. I'm speaking about the muscle that has been stretched, of course, that has been demonstrated by, you know, the owners, the powers that may be, the owners of the economy. We have seen how scholars, you know, your colleagues in the academia have also decided to just, you know, hide under the tables and not confront the issues that are actually taking place in the country. You hear quite a few people coming out to say, look, these are the problems that we have in the country, and we think that in terms of leadership and governance, we are failing. It's not every day that, you know, you get your people in the academia speaking out on issues such as that. I think we need to speak about what, of course, have been a very serious and disturbing subject in the country, where we see Black professionals being, you know, continuing being at the receiving end, pushed out of government, pushed out of all the strategic and key positions, leadership roles. We see companies, Black-owned companies, having their banking facilities being closed. What do you make of this?
Yes, it's a means. You remember the disruption that was caused by the Jacob Zuma administration to the accumulation system of white monopoly capital. That disruption was so destructive, and it was so shocking to them that they thought that they were so secure with the ANC for the past 25 years or so, pushing their line. But all of a sudden, there is this shift at the high echelons of the ANC to dislodge the ANC from their control, and to then dislodge the whole state apparatus from their control. So it was a shock to them. Now, anyone who is associated with that ANC, any business person who provided support, material or financial support to that ANC, that created that, to those rogue elements, as they put it, they say it's 9 wasted years. Any professional, any business person who provided support or is associated with that era, then faces the wrath of this ruling class, because you don't want them near. Because what happened is that they managed, you know, these Black business people and these professionals, they managed to have a sneak peek of how actually things are run, to have a sneak peek on the powers, on buttons that can be pressed to make things happen. they have a sneak peek. They know how things run. I'll give you an example. If you take Machela Koko for an example, he knows ESCOM inside out. He knows what is happening even when he's outside. So those, you take Prime Leaf, for example, from the PIC to ESCOM to Transnet. So those people, they know to a large extent the bureaucracy of the state apparatus and the relationship between the state and these big bosses that are controlling the minerals energy finance complex. So you want to cut that experience out, cut it out, Lucky Montana, cut, so that you disempower whatever radical forces, because if the radical forces were to take over, they will need those technical skills, you see, to continue to run the state and to run these institutions, but in the interest of the people as a whole. But you need to make sure that those people who have that knowledge are besmirched, they are they are badly presented in public light, you know, and so forth, so that they are untouchables, you know, and that's where the problem is, you know, that's where the problem is. And what do? You remove Machela Koko and the other administrators who are running ESCOM. You put your own people who know nothing. They run the thing down, ESCOM down, but they run ESCOM down in the interest of private accumulation in the energy sector. That is what is happening, you know. So that is what is happening here. The closing of these accounts and so forth. And so these are reprisals, nothing but reprisals against those that are associated with the so-called 9 wasted years, that disruption that occurred. Yeah.
Very interesting response, Professor. Thank you so much. I want to do justice to one person whose hand has been up for quite some time now, and that is Godfrey. Godfrey, you'll be the last speaker, and Professor Chris Malikane will then sum it up and close this session. Thank you very much. Godfrey, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you. Continue.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, you know, for me, I wanted to talk about the issue of alignment.
Or you want to speak about the issue of alignment? Okay. Just try and make sure that your mic is not too close to your mouth so we can hear you well.
Okay. Okay. And then now,
much
how do I sound now?
Much
okay.
better.
Yeah, quickly, it's just to understand from the professor here, because you see, I
think Godfrey is muted. If you can unmute, okay.
Yeah, it was a call coming.
Okay. All right, I think we have got an issue there. Someone is trying to reach out to Godfrey. Professor, I want to thank you very much for having joined us here this afternoon. This conversation was an eye-opener to a lot of us. I mean, as a journalist, I continuously write about, you know, various topics affecting the country. And, you know, we are the voice of, you know, the people, and it's always important to actually make your time to interact with people and of course share the insights. I mean, your expertise of course is one of the economy, where you get to give us, you know, the analysis of what is happening in the country, because these things are interlinked. So it's very important to have this conversation, and I'm hoping that you will be our guest again very soon, as I see that there are many people trying to speak to us and interact on this engagement. How do you close this beautiful session? What is your parting remark?
My parting remark is the one that has been raised by Isaac Homo, the need for an epistemic change in the way we see ourselves as African people, and the one that Carl raised, the death of ideology. We need to go back and think about our history, where we are, and in that process, when we fashion the solution, we need to have that epistemic awareness that we are African people, we are the indigenous people of this country who are supposed to be owning and controlling the economy and society, its culture, and so forth. So let's organize. We need to organize, get our house in order and organize ourselves so that we can play our role in this country.
Changing of the mindset, reorganizing towards our emancipation is what Professor Malikane is stressing this afternoon as we close this session. We want to thank everyone who has made time to join us here this afternoon, and of course all the contributions that have been made, the questions asked, and clarity that was sought. We want to thank everybody, the Press Club South Africa. We hope that they will be giving us more of these type of conversations, engagements, because they form a very important aspect of discussions moving into 2024. And yeah, we can speak about the very important national conference of the ANC, where the country will know its fate through the leadership that will be chosen. And this recording will be, of course, available. We're going to post it online at Professor Chris Malikane on Twitter. I hope that he will also post it as we make it accessible to him and others. And you can also find me at Thabo Makwakwa on Twitter. I'm going to, of course, post it. Thank you very much once again. Have the rest, a good resting day, and enjoy your afternoon. Thanks, Press Club South Africa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.